Hello. Tonight I'm going to be making a reflection on humility, and I will read the abstract of a paper, a theological paper on the subject, which I'm going to be referring to. I have skimmed it, but I will be reading it in full online, I believe. But first, I'll read out a reflection I wrote on this subject and why I've been reflecting on it recently. So, uh, humility has always been a topic of tremendous interest to me, particularly because of the ways in which it is misunderstood and misinterpreted by many. It is striking to me how often people relate humility with outward gestures is something performed or acted out. I have frequently observed people performing elaborate gestures like bowing low, shaking hands, or bending down in gestures that suggest submission. But these acts many times seem disconnected from the true state of their hearts. Many times, in my mind, these external displays are not always reflective of genuine humility, theologically, as I understand it. Rather, they seem to me to be superficial, as if humility is a mere performance or a social custom that is done for the sake of appearances or to some end. So, in reflecting on this, I'm reminded of a passage from the Bible in Matthew chapter 23, verses 25 to 26, in which Jesus rebukes the Pharisees and says of them, or says to them, quote, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye make clean the outside of the cup, of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also." So the New Testament is about cleaning inside before out. It isn't about trying to act out holiness or cleanliness. It is about being truly transformed by Christ and then having those fruits manifest. So this passage speaks powerfully to me of the error of focusing on external appearances while neglecting the internal purity of one's heart. That letting God give one a heart of flesh and taking a heart of stone, which happens at the point of salvation. So just as the Pharisees were obsessed with outward cleanliness while allowing inner corruption to fester, so many people fixate on external expressions of humility, bowing down, soft speeches, lowering their gaze. There's even memes about this where, well, it's perhaps not directly related to this, but how people bowing and trying to outcompete the others in supposed humility, but their hearts remain untouched by true humility. So, what is true humility? To me, I think it is an inner transformation that cannot be reduced to gestures or expressions. It involves a purified heart that comes at salvation and a deep understanding of one's own limitations through the Word of God. And this is only arrived at through a proper relationship with others and with God. So I think I'll be reading this chapter, which I think speaks to what genuine humility is. And I think it's not just about thinking less about oneself in an exaggerated or self-deprecating way, or about public displays of lowliness. I think it is more about truthfully recognizing one's weaknesses and and the true need for Christ, and upon receiving that grace, cultivating an attitude of service and self-sacrifice that genuinely puts others' needs before one's own. So this actually reminds me of that difference that people speak of between being kind and nice. Nice people try to please others. They try to do things they believe will make others happy. Kind people may not come off as pleasant, but they have others' interests at heart. So ultimately, in judging character, I think the kind person wins every time because nice is just about the appearance, whereas kind is genuine. So the Christological understanding then of humility is particularly striking because it is grounded in the example of Christ, who, according to Philippians 2:7, made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a servant. So that's a profound act of humility. So I think I will now jump into this chapter, which I think will help deepen for anyone that's interested in this subject, that understanding of humility, which I'm interested in because I did reflect. I felt some people's appraisal at some points of my actions didn't weren't consistent with my own intentions, and at some points I did find, not always, but at some points I found many people were focusing on supposed niceness or gestures of humility and not the substance. And that's what um, drove me to want to look into this issue. And I think this paper brings out the topic excellently, and it's grounded in theology. It's very long. I think I'll read just the abstract and the first few bits, and then I'll end there. But I think this is a brilliant paper, an introduction to humility, which I'll be completing later on as well. So let me open it. Okay, there it is. A Christian account of humility. Abstract. This chapter explains and offers an initial defense of a Christian conception of humility that is biblically grounded, theologically informed, and philosophically sound. It interacts with the views of several philosophers and theologians who have offered a variety of accounts of the virtue of humility. While it does not engage in a comprehensive overview of every account of humility that is on offer, it references and discusses other views in order to clarify the account it describes. The account developed in this chapter is Christological insofar as it is grounded in the gospel accounts of the life of Christ and other portions of the New Testament, especially Philippians, 2 1 to 11, that are relevant to understanding humility as it is exemplified by Jesus in these texts. So I'll start. I think I'll read to this point. Honestly, I'll read this in as part of several videos. In this chapter, I offer an analysis of this is the person that wrote this, obviously, that's saying this. In this chapter, I offer an analysis of a Christian conception of the moral virtue of humility, applying the methods of philosophy to the field of moral theology for the sake of developing and defending a thick understanding of this important virtue. With this aim in mind, in what follows, I make use of biblical texts, theology, philosophy, and some relevant empirical data. Perhaps most importantly, the account I develop is Christological insofar as it is grounded in the gospel accounts of the life of Christ and other portions of the New Testament that are relevant to understanding humility as it is exemplified by Christ in these texts. As I stated in chapter 1, Christian ethics must arise from the person of Jesus Christ. Given this, a Christian understanding of the moral virtue of humility must arise from an analysis of the humility of Jesus. First, consider a common understanding of the virtue of humility, which includes the claim that it involves having a low view of oneself. What does it mean to have such a view? Some contend that a humble person thinks that neither she or her accomplishments are worth very much. The humble person will be hesitant to take risks, eschew ambition, and have relatively low aspirations because of her low self esteem or self regard. The humble individual will deflect and perhaps reject any praise of her character, accomplishments, or talents. Humility is so understood if it involves certain unreasonable forms of devaluing oneself, of underestimating one's own abilities and worth, is problematic for reasons that will be made clear in what follows. Many within Christian tradition espouse views of humility that involve having a low view of oneself in some sense. Whether or not these views are problematic depends on whether or not they include a devaluing or underestimation of oneself. It is one thing to have a low view of oneself because one is sinful, but it is quite another to see oneself as lacking the value one has as an image bearer of God, or to underestimate one's positive qualities. With respect to these issues, consider Dietrich von Hillebrand's claim that the humble man, quote, considers himself the least among his fellow men, more sinful and unworthy than everyone else. This view is acceptable and is consistent with the account of humility I give in this chapter if it is interpreted in the following manner. You equals, for I know I'm more sinful than anyone else. I shall end here and we'll continue with this another time. Thank you very much.